Hey y'all, I'm Wheezy with Prissy Pearls and Outlaws Customized, and I'm going to show y'all today how to make a Crackle style tumbler. So what you need is a tumbler. I have a pre-sanded one here. So I'll add my link in my bio for the pre-sanded tumblers because they save you a lot of time. So I took my pre-sanded tumbler outside and I sprayed it with this. I wanted something kind of like a neutral color for my background that you can see between the cracks. This is called a Coastal Sage right here just because this is my preference and brand. This is pretty much the only brand that I use, but occasionally with certain colors you kind of have to step outside of brands on occasions. But here I have my tumbler and it's pre-sanded, pre-prepped and all. I messed it up a little bit when I sprayed it, but that's not going to matter whenever we do the Crackle look, because it'll pretty much cover everything. So we have our tumbler ready. You'll also need some Elmer school glue. It's all preference. I've seen people use the white. That's what I've always used. But I've also seen people use the clear. I'm sure you can use the glitter one as well. But you need some kind of brush. This is my preference in brush right here. But, I mean, I've even seen people use, like, the makeup brushes, and I've also seen people use the little sponge brushes as well. So it's just whatever you have, or just whatever you prefer. And then for my overlay over the outside of my Crackle, I'm going to just use regular white acrylic paint. And if you want to speed the process up, you may need a heat gun or like a hair dryer or something. Or either you can just wait and let it kind of air dry for a minute or two. So you just have to be really careful that you only dry the outside layer and not down deep. But I'll explain that as I go. And just to make life a little bit easier here, I have a color palette that I'll take and put my glue in just to use a little bit at a time. The way most people have explained it, and you'll find out what method works easiest for you. So all I did here was put a little bit of Elmer school glue in here. I'm going to try to get right in the camera so y'all can see what I'm doing. But you just get you a big glob of that glue on there. You get your bottom good. But you always find a certain method that works best for you. There's no right or wrong ways in doing this. Because there's definitely trial and error with some of these methods. It took me forever to get the tack it method down. That's not, of course, what I'm doing right now, but the tack it method, if you're familiar with any kind of cups, the tack it method is kind of a pain in my opinion, but some of these methods, this has been one of my favorite ones doing the Crackle tumblers. I think it's just so amazing how you just go from this to the after effects. It's almost like magic. But all I'm doing is putting a nice, even, thin layer on there. And what you'll notice is if you're using a brush like this, or, I mean, any of the brushes you'll see it with, but I particularly, like I say, this is my favorite one. You'll see the little lines, if you see the little lines there, and also you probably see the bubbles, but those, they're not going to matter. They're just going to help with the technique a little bit better. But those lines is what helps with the crackle effect and just kind of gives it that extra look. But what I'm going to do here, I'm going to be quiet for a second. I'm just going to take my heat gun and lightly dry the outside layer of this. That way it'll hold the inner side will be kind of damp. And then we'll go on to the next step. But I don't want it fully dry. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. But if you set it out to let it dry on its own without kind of forcefully drying it, I think most people's always set about 5 or 10 minutes, depending on, I guess, how thick you make it. But what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to dry that light outer coat there so that you can apply the next color on, or whatever color you use on top of there. I think I'm going to make this one into like a backroads kind of country theme. Maybe some sunflowers, something to pretty it up. What I'm seeing here, I'm seeing kind of a little bit of the drying process. I don't know if you can really see it. It's all nice and shiny there, but to the eye, I can see what I'm looking for here with the drying process. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take and wipe this Elmer's glue. Might be smart if I close this glue up before I knock it over. I'm almost out. Got to get some more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a napkin and wipe this extra glue off, and I'm just going to use the same brush. So my next step here, I'm going to take my little palette and just put a little bit of this white glue here. I'm going to probably put just a little bit more. I think it usually takes a little bit more than that. That should be plenty. And that's all I have there is a little bit of white acrylic paint. Make sure I get this clean. I mean, it don't have to be perfect. I'm going to go over this one more time real quick with the, yeah, it's already drying out quick. I don't need to go back over it anymore. If you can probably actually see the drying effect already taken in there. So what most people say, you try to do this in one swipe. I personally don't ever get it done in one swipe, but it's still it'll still turn out as long as you don't go, you're trying not to dig too deep into that Elmer's glue there so that you don't kind of like wipe it up. You're trying not to wipe it up. So there we got the bottom. And you kind of almost go in globs on the sides. And I see little chunks coming down. That's probably where it's trying to dry on me, but I'll get all that stuff wiped out of there. And I'm already out of paint, y'all. I'm almost out of paint too. That's how much I've used the white. I use a lot of the white. Acrylic paint's like your best friend when you're doing this kind of stuff. You just want to be sure that you're covering everything. I think what I did differently this time, I usually do my glue, I think, a little bit thicker. I think that's what changed things up, but either way, you're kind of going for that rustic look, so it's not too much going to matter. You just want everything covered. So much for that one swipe that I was talking about earlier. You just try to get everything covered. I need more glue. Or not glue, but paint. There we go. Yes, I got that really thick there. And now, let me make sure I got everything covered. There we go. Oh, that's kind of wiping off right there. It doesn't matter though. Or at least I don't think it does. So here's for the magic. There's a little too thick right there. Let me clean that piece up and that piece, and there we go. Okay. So here's for the magic. You don't want to hold it too close because it will bubble up. But if you see, we're getting a crackle effect already. Isn't that cool? Of course, with the heat gun, you don't want to keep it too close too long because it'll actually bubble that the paint up from the base. I've had it happen once or twice, and honestly I just redid it because I didn't want to take any chances on it messing up my base and causing the epoxy to come up later. But you just kind of, honestly and truthfully, these little cracks and everything come up wherever they want to. And you just keep kind of going of how thick. You keep going over it until you get it as thick as you want it. Sometimes these little things have a mind of their own. There's a piece of my bristle off of my paintbrush. But of course that just kind of blends in there. But sometimes you notice these creases have a mind of their own, but these are really fun to make, especially, I mean, you can even do, like on the base that I was talking about earlier, you can even do like a glitter base. I've done a glitter base, and then you can take and go through and make your peekaboos where you can see the glitter more or less, how much ever. I mean, you can just make the cracks in it, but you just don't get as much of the glitter effect. And I've also taken it to where I've made them and dabbed a little bit of white glitter in the overlay of the epoxy and just got a light shine over top of the design or whatever. You can, I mean, you can do anything. These are endless with what you can do with them, because they're just, that crackle will go with almost anything just about, especially if you're doing any farm designs and things of that nature. I'm going to try to see if I can get enough heat right here and get a crackle in there. But it's trying to bubble up on me, so it must be dry. But there you go. I think everything's pretty much. And what I'm going to do with this before I design it or anything else, I'm going to set this up and let it sit for like 24 hours. That way that I know all that thickness there is cured before I put epoxy on it. And of course my next step is epoxy. I personally, I know a lot of people seal between every single layer. I'm not going to seal this just because I personally don't feel that it needs it. Because once that glue and that paint dries, it's dry. But I mean, to each their own. You can, if you feel more confident in taking and putting a little bit of clear paint on it to seal it, go ahead. But I personally am not, because I'm going to wait on this to dry about 24 hours, and then I'm going to just go in and put a layer of epoxy on. That way it's not wet up underneath and possibly cause any kind of damage to my epoxy. But then my next steps will be, this will dry 24 hours, then it'll go down for epoxy, and then I'll put my designs on it, and then I'll epoxy it 1 or 2 more times, and then we'll have a finished product. But there is the crackle method. I hope y'all enjoyed it. Take care. Have a good day.